Well, today we're going to be looking at America's flirtation with being an empire and expanding even beyond the North American continent and what that's going to entail. So, if you're in American Pageant, this is chapter 27. So, to start things off, the first discussion question was, what were the causes and signs of America's sudden turn toward internal involvement at the end of the 19th century? And this is where we really begin to think about certain philosophies that have really come to be believed at the time. The first is Josiah Strong, who makes a case for a moral expansion, that to expand morality, to bring more people under the fold, missionaries need to be going out into the world. And so this, of course, in Christianity, this is nothing new, but to bring this kind of as America can expand and bring this is something unique, that America's expansion means expansion of morality. And the next is a man named Alfred Thayer Mahan. Now, Alfred Thayer Mahan is a very revered intellectual in naval history. He has a book that he writes and proclaims that the battle for the seas will be the battle for world supremacy, that whoever controls the seas will be the major superpower of the 20th century. And a lot of what he says is prophetic, right? I mean, you're obviously going to see that naval power is going to be instrumental in World War I and World War II going on later. And again, you see the powers around the world really start to try to beef up their navy. And you also have this belief amongst a lot of religious people that the growth of America could bring about the growth of morality. The other thing is we have some territories just south in Central America that are actually controlled by the Europeans. And this is where things are going to get interesting. So Hawaii has a queen, has a monarchy, and we have Cuba that's controlled by Spain. Those are going to be two of the places we focus. And then there's going to be this little situation where we have heard that the there have been reports from our two major newspapers, from both a man named Joseph Pulitzer and William Randolph Hearst, that the Spanish soldiers in Cuba are mistreating the people. A lot of this is where your term yellow journalism comes in, that they're maybe exaggerating this to get headlines. I mean, absolutely a part of this, but we send a battleship, the USS Maine, off the coast of Cuba to check it out, and it explodes. Now, a lot of controversy at the time. It was widely believed that it was torpedoed. It looks today like it was not torpedoed. It looks like it was most likely some kind of internal explosion. There's a lot of theories into that I'll let you look into, but it does not look like it was caused by a torpedo. But what this does is it puts President McKinley in a very difficult situation, and he decides to engage the Spanish forces in Cuba to expel them. He did not want the Spanish to control Cuba. He really didn't want to get into a fight over this. But, it was an opportunity, and there was a real hunger for it, and the newspapers were pushing this. So this is where we see this Spanish-American War. Remember, the Spanish-American War is going to take place in Cuba and off the coast of Cuba. There's some very interesting stories that come out of it. Just the one that I'll share is, of course, going to be the Rough Riders, which is a crew of ex-rugby players that is going to be led by a man who we're going to be talking a lot about in this chapter and later chapters, named Theodore Roosevelt. Now, his victory might have been slightly exaggerated. He wrote the book about it, so absolutely he exaggerated parts of it. But this really does set the stage for America as an expansionist power. We take Cuba. We have an agreement in the annexation of Cuba that the Spanish will not return. We then also have that Puerto Rico will be ceded to us, to the Americans, as part of a annexation of payment for war costs. So we have Cuba, we have Puerto Rico. We help overthrow the Queen of Hawaii. Queen, I call her Lulu because her name is really hard for me to pronounce, but Lulu Lakani. And so what we began to see is this really developing into, is this good? Is this really what we want America to be? We've had this belief that we should control the continent of North America, but should we control, you know, Cuba? Should we control Hawaii? Should we Puerto Rico? Should we continue to take these islands around? Now, Teddy Roosevelt comes in, and when he comes into power, he's going to say, absolutely, that's what you do. Like, you control your area, or someone else will. So we're going to be the power that does that. I love this political cartoon. Um, there's a little caption underneath it that says, and so you got Uncle Sam here, and he's actually supposed to be President McKinley there, and this character there is saying, I wonder, well, I hardly know which to take first. So he's just looking at Cuba, he's looking at Puerto Rico, he's looking at the Philippines. We're going to gain the Philippines here in this time as well, with Commander Dewey. And so we have really expanded a lot. And of course, we have a pushback from especially the Democratic Party who's saying, what are we doing this for? Why are we looking to take all these territories? Is this really what America is wanting to look like? So, again, you need to dive into this deeper. The next discussion question is really looking at, so what are the reasons? Why is America getting into this expansionist time period? And I've laid out some of the reasons for you there. There's the religious, there's the power, there's the belief that other people are going to do it anyway. So is this something that is kind of the route America was going in, or is this something very different? I would implore you to really think about that, and as you're looking through this chapter. We then have the election of 1900. They refer to it as a mandate for the two P's, prosperity and protection, as the Republican Party is victorious here. And moving forward, prosperity, talking about kind of a strong economic policy, protection, just talking about a strong military moving forward. And we're then going to see the, not to skip over that too quickly, but we do see this is the re-election of McKinley. He beats William Jennings Bryan, which William Jennings Bryan, again, has been an interesting figure, but has been unable to um, gain the presidency here running again. But they put Teddy Roosevelt as vice president as honestly a way to kind of keep him quiet, bring him in. Vice president was seen as not a big position. I mean, it was really unclear what your duties were underneath the president. And very quickly into his term, William McKinley is going to be shot and killed by an anarchist. And so this guy who you've been trying to keep out of power is now the president of the United States. So that really backfired for the Republicans. And Teddy Roosevelt goes on and says, listen, I'm not a lukewarm person like McKinley who's expanded America, influence and territory, kind of reluctantly. I think we absolutely should grow America's influence. And that's actually going to be one of my goals. And so you see him taking the Monroe Doctrine to be much more aggressive, that we shouldn't fight the Europeans if they come over here. We should pay off the debts of the Central American countries to the Europeans to keep the Europeans out. We should have a presence in Central America to keep the Europeans out. So this is very much a much more aggressive imperialist drive in the Roosevelt administration. So as we come to the end of this chapter, a couple of the things that I want to point you to when we're talking about this age of empire is a lot of people point to this moment as being the moment that America becomes the world power. Okay, so you've got to remember before the Civil War, we really were not heavily engaged. American Revolution was a big victory. We then have the Mexican-American War, which was a victory, but it was a victory over here. Now we're going to see America that really for the first time in its history is looking to expand aggressively around the world. So this really marks some new territory for America moving forward.